Ado, ATARASHII GAKKO, and YOASOBI are performing together. I cannot state how big this is. On March the 16th at the Peacock Theatre in Los Angeles for Matsuri 25. That's not really the important bit. I just thought I'd give you the details first of all. But the important thing is just how big these artists are and how big it is that they're performing together at an event like this. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the individual artists today, the importance of this, I'm not going to say collaboration, but coming together. Who knows? It might lead to collaborations and stuff. But just why this is such a big thing and what this really means about the state of Japanese music overseas. Now, it's worth giving a little bit of context before I dive into talking about these artists. Of course, I've been in Japan now for more than, well, I've been here for basically a decade, and before then I was spending a lot of time here anyway. So, you know, I'm a little bit out of touch with the West. So a lot of what I hear about what Western attitudes are towards Japanese music comes from speaking to people who are in, obviously, my Japanese music community and such like. But there are little things that give it away. Now, you know, it is true that since 2012, 2012 was roughly when the Western world really started to open up to Asian music a lot more. And we've had so many changes since then. And most of the time since then, admittedly, I have been in Japan. But things like in 2012, obviously, Gangnam Style, the whole explosion of K-pop, that was a thing that really burst out. But we also had Kyari Pami Pami with Pom Pom Pom. That song was huge. We had Baby Metal in 2014 bursting out. And since then, Bandmade, all these kind of things. But it is true that there's always been a niche interest in Japanese music. There's always been things like these little Matsuri events. I remember these in London going back years, you know, all these kind of things. But it's just amazing to see artists this big. So I thought I'd get a little bit of research to see, okay, is this just three famous artists performing at some piddly little venue for a tiny little Matsuri event? Well, this is a picture of the Peacock Theatre, and I'm going to say that's pretty big. It's pretty big. I mean, admittedly, if you saw any of these three artists in Japan, I saw YOASOBI, and that was like filling Tokyo Dome. They're the only one of these three artists I've actually seen. But, you know, I saw some of the people who follow my channel saw Ado in London, and that was not the biggest venue, but, you know, still, it is really impressive to see that these artists are filling out big stages like this in America, that these audiences are here. And this is one of the great things for all the complaining that people around my age in their 30s usually do about the internet generation. It's amazing that it's brought the world so much closer, that people are connecting with international music like this. I personally am super excited about this. Here's the Peacock Theatre's website as well. But let's get on to talking a little bit about this, because I actually have, you know, we're always honest on this channel. I'm excited for the Japanese music industry, but there's also some other points I want to bring up about this. So first of all, let's just start by talking about the individual artists themselves. Now, Ado, I think, has been very much she's the most indicative of this current generation, where there seems to be not only this sort of VTuber thing, which I know she's not a VTuber, but obviously the VTuber generation over the last few years has really brought to the fore the idea of having people who are famous without showing their face, you know, sort of an extension of the online avatar, really taken to its logical conclusion that you were performing that way. And of course, in the past, there were things like Gorillaz before that and bands who'd done this, but that was always seen as a bit of a gimmick, whereas now it's somewhat more mainstream to be an artist who doesn't really show their face. And Ado is, well, the face of that particular trend, because she is so famous, and yet most of us who've heard her name and listened to her voice and could tell her voice from just a few seconds of hearing it could walk up to her in the street and not know it was her. And that's an amazing level of fame, but it also highlights how much she's really brought to the fore the idea of vocals being the most important thing. And I personally adore the way she's done that. I adore that she's added this emotion and intensity to everything. I have said that, well, actually, the most recent song she came out with, Elf, for me, was a real return to form, because I loved her at the beginning of the career, and Elf, I feel like she's really been coming back around. There was a period in the middle of her career, for me, it's not been a very long career, but I felt like there was a point where the being dramatic, it almost felt like she had to be dramatic in every song, and it was becoming a little bit much. And I think there was one song I heard, I wish I could remember the name, I keep on talking about it, I need to research it and find out, but it had a fairly famous Japanese producer, and it was kind of like a party song, and she sounded like she was having way too much of an emotional explosion on that song, and it just didn't feel right. So I feel like sometimes Ado feels a little bit like she's pushed to have to sound dramatic in every single song, when a lot of the time, you know, when you've got that level of skill, sometimes skill comes into is shown through subtlety, and thus Elf, for me, the latest single, as I believe it still is, was just a fantastic indication to me that Ado is maturing as an artist, in that song for me, was one of the most impressive she's ever done, and yet it was not over the top. She wasn't exploding with expression. It was just kind of, it was a very simmering song. We felt the emotion build up. So I feel like Ado is definitely reaching I think she's reaching the next stage in her career. So this is really exciting for me to see. Now, YOASOBI, I'm going to skip to YOASOBI first of all, because YOASOBI are an artist who, obviously, they've done so many great things. And they are musically probably my favorite of the three artists, because I just love the crazy sound they play around with. And it is that thing of having Lila Sakuta, who's obviously worked with Anno, big Anno fan, not Ado, Anno, but she did those fantastic collaborations with Anno. But as well as that, you know, she's a very versatile singer, solo in her own right, and then working with the other gentleman whose name I can't remember, who basically does the production and stuff. They do these amazingly creative songs. And of course, we have to mention the most famous, being Idol. This song is phenomenal. I don't think even Ado, I don't think Ado's got a song really that's ever been as famous as Idol. Idol is one of the most just blockbuster songs in Japan, and I think this effect was felt elsewhere. I don't think it necessarily was totally a breakout song in the rest of the world, but in Japan, this song just took over everything. I mean, you look at all the awards it won there. I think you can see those. I haven't checked out, I've lined up the screen, but yeah, you can see what I'm talking about there. And then the sheer amount of time it spent in the charts as well was absolutely incredible. I mean, looking through here, 22 consecutive weeks, second most amount of time at number one. It just broke record after record after record. And yeah, it's funny thing is that's not even their best song, in my opinion, but an absolutely just quintessential example of Japan, you know, the popular music scene in Japan at its height. You know, if you were taking like Ado and saying she is the face of Japanese music, Idol is probably the most beloved and popular song in recent years to come out of Japan, I would say. Again, I'm saying this from the perspective of someone who's in Japan, perceiving overseas attitudes through little things that we notice. And through feedback from people who I know in my community are Japanese music fans anyway. So YOASOBI, just massive impact. And as I mentioned, this is no disrespect to Ado or ATARASHI GAKKO, but YOASOBI are probably my favorite of the three. So I had to jump to them. Now, ATARASHI GAKKO is an interesting one, because ATARASHI GAKKO have had their own very interesting rise to fame. And most notably, and I think this is a real sign, they were on one of those late night shows in America, Jimmy Kimmel, which I believe, as far as late night TV broadcasts, I don't think people really watch scheduled TV that much, but still being on like a big famous show like that, I think is a really big deal. And it shows, you know, those kind of shows, they're not going to book people unless they consider you to be a big deal. And that was a massive thing. So I think ATARASHI GAKKO have had that. And I think of all three of them, it's interesting because YOASOBI are probably the group who least have an image. Ado's whole image is not having an image. So I mean, that's what's so impressive, is that she does this all by the mystique of, you know, not being a face. So of the three of them, ATARASHI GAKKO is the presentational one. That's the one you put front and center because, you know, they're going to grab the audience with their performance. Now, elephant in the room, I'm going to have to address this for anyone who's been following this channel for a while. When it comes to ATARASHI GAKKO, I mean, I'm a bit of a fan of like just both J-pop and of hip-hop and rap. I love that kind of just fusion of music. And there's a lot of stuff in ATARASHI GAKKO's earlier career that I love. 999 is still one of my favorites, almost certainly my favorite by them. They've got some great songs. I got to be honest, one of the other reasons for showing this, and press like now before I say what I'm going to say, because I've got to be honest, they were responsible for, and I believe are performing here, the song Tokyo Calling, which in my opinion, temper your words, Howard, is probably one of the worst songs to come out of Japan in absolutely years. I cannot stand that song. I absolutely despise that song. But I actually like ATARASHI GAKKO. This has always been an interesting one when I'm talking to people in the Discord community about this. It's like, I don't hate ATARASHI GAKKO. I just really hate that song. And they've had a couple of songs since, like Fly High, where I was like, nah, this just, what's going on? So I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan of whatever's been happening with their sound in the last couple of years, but they do have great stuff. They have great personalities. I remember them from back in the day when they did that video on their YouTube channel, or they do it for another. But anyway, they had that video online, which was them showing how to use the Japanese train system. And it was really fun. And I just think that they're a group who, for me, their best days were so much of the formative stuff, and I feel like they've become a little bit of a pastiche of themselves now. But, you know, they're really popular overseas, and they come across as really nice people, and so, you know, good for them. Good for them. It doesn't change the fact that these three artists, if you were to ask who are the biggest three pop artists, as much as I want to say Anno, you know, she's still a niche thing. She's still on the rise. She still only had that one album. Realistically, the three powerhouses of Japanese pop, ATARASHII GAKKO and YOASOBI, are turning up to do a show together. That's what we're talking about here, and that is what is actually happening. I mean, you look at Ado as well. When it's mentioned, she's had tours in America and Europe. I mentioned earlier about how she, you know, she did that show in London. I think it was in 2024 last year that a lot of the followers on my channel went to. It is just so impressive seeing this. I was trying to think, by the way, before I just go on to the next part, I was trying to think of something that anything like this has happened before, and I'm sure there's some really great examples, but my head immediately went into, this isn't quite the same thing, but almost coming in reverse. I remember that Avril Lavigne came to Japan because she's a bit weebed out on Japanese stuff, but she came to Japan back in the mid 2000s, and she did a show with Oatskry and Puffy. And if you are into Japanese music, or you were around the 2000s, you would know how big that was. That was at Tokyo Dome as well. She did a show with, so obviously Avril Lavigne, not Japanese, but however much she wants to be. Credit to you for promoting the culture. Let's not talk about Hello Kitty. But like Oatskry, she was right at the top of her power then. You know, Sakurambo, Happy Days, Planetarium, songs like that. And you've got Puffy, who were, I mean, they'd been obviously to America, and they'd done a song with Avril actually, and they had they had a whole cartoon show over there on Cartoon Network and everything, and so Puffy were really big, and they were even down officially, I don't know if it was before that, but they were down for a while as the official cultural ambassadors of Japan. So this was a huge lineup. But even this, like I say, it wasn't three Japanese artists, and it was Canadian artists coming to Japan to make this happen. So the idea of three artists as big as this taking Japanese music overseas due to demand, that to me, that's really impressive. And that's really where we are on this. Now, this brings us on to what is really the final conclusion. This is where we have to address the fact that, obviously, when we talk about this sort of thing, now I can say, like, for example, I said a moment ago my feelings about the song Tokyo Calling, but I can still tell you that I'm really excited to know artists like ATARASHII GAKKO, Ado, and YOASOBI are doing this kind of show. Because this brings us on to the interesting point. These are pop artists. We've had things like Bandmade performing with Last Rock Stars in the US and stuff like that. But these are pop artists. These are artists who, for a younger generation, are going to have more impact. And I'm not just doing the old man talking about kids these days thing. This is, you know, you look at the industry, this is where it works now. You know, people listen to music in a lot of short form videos, clip videos, you know, TikTok's always the thing we mention, but it's true. And artists like this, artists like Ado, ATARASHII GAKKO, and YOASOBI to a lesser extent, but still with songs like Idol when they have them. And I remember, I can't remember the name, the most recent song, really, really, probably even better than Idol in my opinion, has the weird little clip of English in it. Why can't I remember the name of that song? It's going to kill me now. It's got little pictures of slugs in the music video. Am I going to have to go check that? I'm going to have to go check it. Anyway, while I'm checking it, these artists obviously have a massive effect on the younger sort of generation these days, and that's why this is really important, because they're over there showing this kind of music to an audience who are going to be, they're going to be like shaping what the opinions are of Japanese music moving forwards. You have some, that's it, Undead. It's one of the most watched reactions on this channel. Undead's a brilliant song. But that one, for example, I know that one gets clipped a lot on short form videos. These artists are going to have an impact on what people think of music moving forwards. And people like me, obviously, it's our job to comment on the state of the Japanese music industry. I work with a lot of unsigned music. I think more than a lot of other people who do things like reactions and review videos online, a lot of it's very much focused on rock. I perhaps connect more with the pop side than a lot of other people, because I work with pretty much every genre. And so, when I look at this kind of thing, I know that it's more poppy. And thus, I'm kind of okay with that, because we had, like I said, we had that whole generation of K-pop, and I've been saying for the longest possible time that K-pop has become stale. It hasn't really, other than tiny things, it hasn't really reinvented in such a long time. K-pop music videos look like they've all been directed by the same person now for over 10 years. They all look identical. And so you look at something like this and you think, okay, this is an interesting, this is a new generation. This is, these artists have all been around for a few years. They're not like the brand new thing, but they're new enough and affecting a young enough generation that this is a really good case for Japanese music, in the popular scene, extending this music that we love out to the rest of the world. And it's so easy for people who watch channels like this, and this is not directed at you, but I mean, I think people who watch this channel, usually we have these kind of conversations, very honest on this channel, but I think people in the broader sense of the scene that we all inhabit, there's a lot of people who'll be like, oh, well, they're listening to that, but really, really, it would be much better if they were listening to Bandmate. Oh, sort them out for Babe Metal. And it's like, it's never going to have the kind of appeal that these groups have, that these people have. This has that broader appeal. It has the poppier appeal. There's a big generation who like rock, but it's just not as big a thing for general audiences. In the same way that if you're doing music reviews, you're more likely to find rock fans and metal fans because they're the sort of people who are online looking for new music. They're the sort of people, I think, a lot of the time, because of the fact that pop music in the West, it tends to be less interesting. Pop fans tend to be more casual music listeners. That is true a lot of the time. Not saying they have to be, but it's true of Western listeners. So a lot of the people who are looking for music online tend to be rock fans who are bored of the current state of music. That is true. But when you're appealing to try and have a massive cultural impact, you need to be able to give music that more broad audiences will be able to take in. Stuff that isn't all guitars, is more more variety, but just stuff where there's more flexibility in the sound, that it's not just all rock. And so when you have artists like this, these are the sort of artists who, yes, these can appeal to a more broad base. Now that we live in a world where Western audiences aren't going to hear something with foreign lyrics and go, oh my God, what's that foreign stuff? And that's what it would have been like when I was growing up. I mean, even up to 2010, I think, to a certain degree. The world got a lot smaller with the internet, and it's a while ago that we've had these changes, but it's near enough that we're still dealing with the finding the artists who are going to define that. K-pop certainly took the lead, but these could be those Japanese artists that do it. We had talking about Puffy, Puffy and how they went over, and back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they had their little spell of doing like a TV cartoon in America where they had actresses perform their voices because they couldn't speak English. And that was step one. That was interesting. But back then, they were still seen as an oddity. Like I say, they even had actresses performing their voices because no one knew who the hell they were. Then you had things like, you go through to 2014, 2012, 2014, you got Kyary Pami, Babe Mel. They're exploding the scene. People are interested, but they're still seen as oddities. They're curiosities. Kyary Pami is crazy, way. Babe Mel is like, what is this fusion, And the people who stuck with Babe Metal were mostly metal fans, let's be honest. It's not like they were topping the charts every 5 seconds in the US, but they had a big splash for their, novelty factor. And then through good music, they retained a lot of metal fans. And this is different. This is an age we're in now where overseas artists can latch on and keep a hold of a pop audience, because that's one of the best things about the world getting smaller. That's one of the best things about people being bombarded by... I'm not a big fan of short form videos. I've said this a million times before, but I will never say, these sorts of things, they're never 100% bad. And one of the good things from them is that people, rather than just sort of sitting there picking through what they want to hear, they're exposed to music. They'll just swipe, they'll hear something with a funky beat, they'll go, what's that? And they'll take it in, and regardless, and they'll probably be concentrating on the video. So next thing they know, they're listening to foreign language music without really knowing it. And bam, next thing they're like, oh, what was that song? And it molds into the scene. And so for a younger generation, I mean, look, that theatre I was showing earlier, the Peacock Theatre, it doesn't look like it's not like the biggest venue of them all. But it's big enough that a lot of people are interested. There's a lot of demand, and I think this is really good. And hey, if you're going to this event, let me know. I would love to know. I know there's going to be a lot of us like 30s and 30s plus lots in there. I know, because we're the fans as well. We're the ones who follow them over just because we love the music. But I know there's a lot of younger people getting into this as well. And I would love to know if you're going to this. I'd love to know what kind of generations you see in there. I hope it's a real mix of people. I hope it's something that brings people together. Because it's on that line where it's still poppy, but I feel like it's got that one thing that makes Japanese music special. It's never complacently poppy, with exception to Tokyo Calling. It's never complacently poppy. It's got interesting things underneath it. You listen to Idol by YOASOBI, and it jumps between rap and between pop, and it's got dark and it's got light to it. You listen to Ado's music. She's got some really upbeat stuff. She's got some kind of rap stuff. She's got stuff that goes dark and rocky as well. ATARASHI GAKKO, they got some rock songs. They got some rap songs. They got some stuff that's like, they got dance focused stuff. They got, YOASOBI with like keyboards and big musical arrangements. Ado with this amazing voice. There is so much more than just a bunch of hits here. And that is a great representation of what makes Japan special. And moreover, all three of these artists are big into genre blurring. Again, something that makes Japan so special. So I hope they do well. Let me know what you think. Those are my thoughts on this. As always, I really appreciate you checking this out. It's been a bit of a long rant today, but I thought this was a really interesting topic and 3 artists to talk about. So tell me what you think. And until I hopefully see you very soon in Japan for the next one of these, for now, I need some bloody coffee. I did all of that without any coffee. I'm subsiding on water. It's like against the Geneva Convention or something. Ciao, ciao.